What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. The new rankings just dropped, and now we get to discuss the implications of the new rankings, what I feel, my take on the new rankings, and how I feel about certain teams in the rankings and certain teams that should be in the rankings, as well as we're going to go over the playoff implications for the after this upcoming week. We'll get to see each conference one by one and see which teams still have a chance, which teams do not have a chance, and what I think is going to happen, or even some crazy scenarios that could happen. So stay tuned for that. So right now we're going to go over the top 25. The top 8 teams haven't changed at all. No movement whatsoever. We do see Oklahoma moving back 7 to 17. They were 9. And then we saw some movement, a lot of movement up 1 spot. Couple things within the rankings. We do see there's a lot of Big 12 right there in the middle of the pack. OSU, Kansas, Oklahoma, Kansas at the tail end. But none of those teams have a chance. But they do have 2 losses, so we do give them credit for what credit is worth. And I do think that there is a chance that Oklahoma State could be the team to be there. And we'll talk about that later in the video. But if we go back to the tail end of this, we have Iowa. Welcome back, Iowa, to the top 25. But that's not without some shade towards the ranking system, because Iowa is a bore. As well as they barely score points. They can never cover the 30-point spread. Not one time. They score like 10 to 12 points a game. It's embarrassing. What teams that should be there? I know Air Force, the Group of 5 team. Air Force did lose to whatever, and they're just unlucky. They were 25, and then they lost to Army really, really bad. But teams like Liberty, underrated quarterback performance. They're 9-0 right now. And I know the CUSA isn't very good, but they deserve to be ranked at least a little bit. Like maybe 25th. Just also, Tulane is 1 loss. Fresno State is 1 loss. Freaking Tulane's only losses to Illinois week 1, and they lost by 2 points. Come on, committee. Come on. Give us some love to the Group of 5 teams. As well as James Madison can't even be ranked at all. I get it, they can't go to a bowl game, but they still should be able to be ranked a little bit. Hence, I guess like you can't put them ranked, because then they would be, if they were to be ranked really high, say like 4, hypothetically they couldn't go in. But like, come on, give some love where credit is worth. As well as Rutgers. Rutgers is X3. Arizona's X3, but Rutgers has 2 good losses. They kept up in the game. I could argue that Rutgers is better than Iowa, but I do think Iowa's going to win this weekend against Rutgers, because Iowa at home is a hard matchup, especially against Iowa defense. Iowa defense at home, it's a terrible environment. It's like a lose-lose for Rutgers there. But yeah, my initial thoughts is that Iowa shouldn't be ranked, and that's coming from an Iowa fan telling you how it is. I think Liberty should be ranked. I think Liberty should get credit where credit is worth. The AP poll gave Liberty some love, but I think the playoff committee should give Liberty the 25th spot. I know they don't play anybody, but they can hold the 25th spot for the remainder. This is just showing that the Group of 5, they're just going to give Tulane the January 6th bowl game. No questions asked. Not even a look at Liberty at all. Moving on to the ACC and who is still in contention, we have 11th ranked Louisville and 4th ranked Florida State. I could include other teams that are X2, such as North Carolina, but this is for the playoff rankings and who has a chance. X1, maybe. X2, never going to happen. I know there's a lot of like hypotheticals, like maybe an X2 could make it in because there's a very tough conferences and stuff, but X2 has never made the playoffs, not once in its whole time in existence. So X1s are the only ones going to be notified. There might be some X2s later on that could win the conference, and then there could be some hypothetical conversation. But North Carolina is not going. Louisville doesn't play anyone left. They have like no one left on their schedule. Florida State doesn't really have anyone left on their schedule either. So both these teams are going to play each other. The winner has Florida State, if they win out and they win the championship, they're in. Louisville, because the Big 12 has 1 loss already, so like even if Texas were to win out, they wouldn't make it over Florida State. Louisville has 1 loss, and you could make an argument they have a better record than, say, Texas, but Texas does have the Alabama win, and Alabama's top tier in the SEC right now. So there's also that. But this is ACC for now. I do hope that these two teams keep winning because it'll be really cool to see that ACC championship against Louisville and Florida State. Moving on to the Big 12, this is where I was talking about those X2 teams going to be appearing. They're not going to be very big. They're going to be in like the corners or down below somewhere. I have Oklahoma State here at X2. They are second in the Big 12, so Texas will probably play Oklahoma State. I looked at their remaining schedule. Oklahoma State, I think, still has to play like Kansas State, but I'm not 100% sure. I got to relook. Texas doesn't really play anybody at the regular season, so I do see these two teams going in. So if Oklahoma State were to win the Big 12 to another bowl game because they're X2, I don't think any X2s are going to make it in. Even if Oklahoma State were to win the Big 12, I wouldn't think they would be in. But I do put it in there just so you can visually see the top two teams in the Big 12. Moving on to the Big 10, as you can see, I immediately made the X2 even smaller than the Oklahoma State, and that was for a reason because all three of the big circle teams do have a chance to make the playoffs, but they're all in the same division. So they're all fighting for one spot for the Big 10 title game. Iowa, off chance they win out and beat one of these three teams, they're not going to the playoffs, but it'll be really cool to see it. It'll be like, oh, Iowa just has the Big Ten title with some of the worst offensive game in the league. But hypothetically, there's some crazy scenarios that could happen here. If Penn State were to win out, which means they beat Michigan this weekend, Michigan will be X1. Michigan then goes on to beat Ohio State. So then it'll be Ohio State X1, Michigan X1, Penn State X1. Then I'm pretty sure Ohio State would go to the Big Ten title game just because their record of wins will be better than Michigan, because Michigan's only other ranked win would be against Ohio State, and they would have lost to Penn State. Ohio State beat Penn State, etc. So then Ohio State would go X1, and then if they win out, they'll be X1. They'll be probably more indicted to go in. Then the conversation would be like, does Michigan, their only loss is the number one team in the league, they beat the number one team, should they be in? Then there's Penn State who also beat Michigan, and so it would be a cool conversation to see how that all plays out. And then Iowa, they're just looking for a good bowl game this year. Next, the Pac-12. I didn't put any bonus players in there because there are still two teams in contention. 5 and 6, Washington, Oregon. They did play each other. Washington does have the win over Oregon, but I will argue that Oregon did play better football than Washington, and Oregon has played better football ever since. So I think Washington is in a very peculiar spot. They can't afford to lose, because if they lose, then they're probably going to be out, because Oregon is definitely on the FBI scale is better than Washington. I think Oregon, if they were to win out, they have a huge argument at X1 to go to the playoffs over, say, like Texas, or because Oregon has been playing a lot better football. And I do think Texas has a chance to lose one of these games coming up. So there'll be X2. There'll be a bunch of X2s in the Big 12, which isn't good. I do see Texas losing to Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game, just because I think Oklahoma State is having a better second half of the season than Texas. Next on, we have the SEC. This one is very interesting, and there will be huge arguments on like what would happen. So let's say, hypothetically, Ole Miss beats Georgia this weekend. Georgia goes down to X1. Ole Miss moves up. Alabama has the win over Ole Miss. So even if they both win out, Alabama will go to the SEC title against Georgia. Say Alabama beats Georgia, or Georgia beats Alabama, Ole Miss is going to be sitting there out of the SEC title game, X1, with a win over Georgia. Say like Georgia wins the SEC. Ole Miss beat Georgia. So in their prime, like 9-0 Georgia, like not even like the beginning of the season, like it was just so lucky because it was the beginning of the season, late season. So then the argument would be, why doesn't Ole Miss get to be in the top 4? Because there's a lot of other X1s. We're just going to hypothetically say there's a lot more X1s than just a bunch of undefeated teams. Because then Georgia would be X1 going. Then the argument would be like, Ole Miss beat Georgia, and the only reason Ole Miss couldn't go to the championship game is because they lost Alabama early in the year, and it's just unfortunate. So like that, then there's more conversations, all these hypotheticals, and this is why we need a 12-team playoff this year, because there's so many good teams, so much good football that is being played right now, and I think that having that 12-team playoff this year would definitely just make everything easier. than what all these hypotheticals, all these conversations. But if Georgia were to beat Ole Miss this weekend, then Ole Miss is pretty much out of contention completely, and then Georgia's resume gets boosted, and then another hypothetical is say Georgia wins out, Alabama wins out, Alabama beats Georgia SEC title game, because it has happened before, and they both ended up going, and Georgia won the national title game against Alabama in a rematch of that year. I think that was 2 years ago. So it does happen. X1 teams can get in, even when just because they have better schedules, they're better programs, and et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you like to see this type of content. Please show some love. Let me know if you like the way I formatted the video and how everything is going. And that's going to be it for this. Peace.